of the rig recovery and the water start. Part 5 is devoted exclusively to the star of the show, the carve jibe. And in a crashing finale, we tempt you to go for all manner of stunts, including the duck jibe. Some people manage to sail in gale-force winds with ridiculous ease and comfort, not through having some God-given athletic prowess, but through establishing a clean chain of power from a well-set sail, down to the boom, into your harness line, through your body, through your legs and into the board. And it's when one link in that chain is a little weak that we get problems. That's all very well for me to stand here smugly on the beach with a rock holding the back of the board and a producer holding the front. So I'll show you more clearly what I mean out on the water. Breathe in now, chap. Even with the best technique, you'll look and feel in mortal agony if your gear is set up badly. So let's clarify the ideal. Your aim is to take the power and drive it via your body against the board's center of lateral resistance, which, if the board is planing properly, should lie between your feet. The first link in that chain is the sail, which must deliver an even and constant pull. Now, I'm not going to insult you by teaching you how to put a mast up a sleeve. I'm just going to focus in on a few essential aspects of rigging which are going to improve your speed and above all allow you to settle into that balanced position we've just seen. Now your first priority must be to make the sails stable so that the power stays in the same place. And on the camber-induced sail and the rotational, it comes from the same aspect of rigging. That's to say tension in the luff panel, which is brought on by downhaul. Now you can see on both these they're tight as drums. That means that when the gust hits the sail and the two ends of the mast come together, that the tension still stays in that panel, the effort stays in the same place, and you accelerate and don't end up having to twist your body. Now compare that to this, a sail with no luff panel tension at all, thanks to lack of downhaul. First thing that happens as the wind hits it is that horizontal creases appear, then a huge gap appears between the mast and the luff. The fullness then gets deeper and moves back to take up the bagginess, forcing you to slip into your old survival stance. On the water, the sail is a nightmare in the manoeuvres. The drive is all over the place. The flow moves back as you sheet in, and it's just a fight from beginning to end. So exactly what shape are we after? Air likes to follow a smooth path, and when it reaches bumps or flats, it detaches itself, and in sailing terms, that means a loss of power and speed. So our aim is to make a smooth curve. And in the camber-induced sail, you can see that's very pronounced here, but it's the same with the rotational. A fine entry into the foil, getting deeper and deeper, reaching maximum about 35% back. This leaves you with the perfect compromise. The depth of draft provides good acceleration, whilst the fine entry and smooth curve give you a blistering top speed and allow you to streak upwind. It's mast foot pressure that allows you to line the board up in the beach and water starts. It's by increasing mast foot pressure that you lever yourself up onto the board in the water start. It's mast foot pressure that keeps the board tracking smoothly through the carve jibe. It's mast foot pressure that steers the board and allows you to control the rotation in the flare and slam jibes. And above all, it's by using mast foot pressure that you can keep the board level as you move back into the foot straps. Many people say to me, quite reasonably, how on earth can you sail the board from these back straps and bring the rig with you without the board turning into wind? Because they know their steering theory. And sure enough, in light winds with the dagger board down, the board's center of lateral resistance is fixed in the middle. But when you retract it for planing conditions, that point of resistance is now mobile. And as the board accelerates and starts to plane on less and less area, that point of resistance then moves back and back and back until finally it lies just in front of the fin. So then you can move back with it and bring the rig with you without the board turning into wind. So the most obvious tip must be, get planing first before trying to get back into the straps. Off the plane, the whole board is in the water and the centre of resistance is well forward. As it accelerates and lifts onto a smaller area, that point moves back. And then, when it's fully planing on its minimum area, it moves right back to just in front of the fin, in between the feet. It's only then that you can draw the rig right back to close the slot. To move smoothly into the straps requires subtle trim, not this elephantine leap onto the tail, which effectively pulls on the handbrake. This speedboat is suffering from much the same problem. It's not planing because there's too much weight on the back, which is sinking the stern and causing drag. But when the fellow at the back trims it flat by moving forward, the boat immediately accelerates. And now that it's planing, he could move back again. In windsurfing terms, he just increased the mast pressure. Here's a graphic example of mast foot pressure in action, sailing the board across the wind in a feeble breeze right from the tail without sinking it. As you move back, you compensate for the shift in weight by bending the knees and leaning forward and down on the boom. Now for the real thing, looking first at the upper body. In higher winds, the extra power in the sail naturally increases the mast foot pressure, so you don't have to lean forward so much. The idea now is to pretend the rig is fixed upright, so you extend away on straight arms, leaving the rig forward where it produces maximum power and keeps the board off the wind, whilst you move back. In marginal winds, it pays to stay out of the harness so you can extend further away from the rig. But if it's a little windier, you can hook in earlier before you move back. In many cases, this allows you to sheet in harder and will improve your acceleration, as well as being a lot less tiring. And now for the feet. Stand in the middle of the board, and as you bear away and accelerate, move the back foot onto the centre line in between the front and back straps. This foot can then trim the board flat as you lift the front foot into the front training strap. Don't be in a hurry to move the back foot, leave that floating and free for the moment. Once you've got used to the feeling of having your foot anchored, you can soon bypass the training straps and move the front foot straight into the rear strap. See how the board always stays level. The moment when you slip the back foot into its strap depends on the wind strength. In a moderate force 4 like this, there's always a danger of sinking the tail, so wait for the board to gather speed before gradually shifting your weight back onto it. In strong wind, where there's a real danger of being pulled over the front, move that back foot into the strap earlier for safety, but still try to be light on your feet and keep the power on and the rig forward. Yes, I know, it's not as easy as it looks, so over to you, Sid. Down into two parts. The rig recovery, for many the bugbear of the whole thing, and then the getting on. In the interests of energy conservation, we leave the swimming until last and start with something you know. The dear old beach start, because that's what the last part of the water start really is. So on a shallow shelving beach like this, try first to smarten it up so it's one easy movement rather than a jump on and scramble. Then move out into deeper water, so you have to rely more on the rig to pull you up rather than the spring in your feet. And then finally venture right out until your feet are barely touching. And aha, we're now entering new territory, so cue the longboards and the light winds, please. Try this. Lie down on the board. With your weight over the tail, the only way to keep it level and then stand up is to lean forward, apply heaps of mast foot pressure, and lever yourself up under the boom. Then sink down onto the back leg and drag the front leg in the water and stand up again using mast foot pressure. If you can do this, you should now manage that deep water beach start. Try letting the backhand go. Not as a display of machismo, but just to prove that with the rig upright, you can pull down on the boom and get up with no power in the rig at all. And now we get wet. When you're up to your neck in water, yes, at first the rig does appear to have a mind of its own. But you have various ways to control the power. You can sheet in and out with the backhand. The amount of force also depends on how much sail you expose to the wind. You increase the power by pushing it up and reduce it by pulling it down. You then have to use that power to maneuver the board into position. And as you'll find out, water starting is a doddle if you can get your board and yourself into the right positions. It's just like beach starting, but now you have to swim, and always swim upwind of the board so you can apply mast foot pressure to bear it away and head it up. Then you can water start in any direction. Your final aim is to get the board just off the wind and yourself upwind of the board, level with the front straps. Your approach to the board is crucial. If you try to climb on from the back, you have no room to maneuver the feet and no control of the front of the board, which then swings straight into wind. But by swimming upwind, you can then apply mast foot pressure to bear the board away, at which point the power in the rig increases and up you go. Jane here has kindly agreed to help me get across a very important part of water starting, getting on the board. She is my wind and I am the hopeful water starter. Right, now try and pull me up. What wind strength do you think you are at the moment?
Oh, about a force 8.
Yeah, pretty gusty one at that. Now it's not going very well because I am miles away from the board. My legs are too straight and she's got to pull me up in a huge arc. So if I bend the legs and get much further into the board and make myself more compact, I should come up in a much smaller arc and life should be easier. Let's give it another go. What strength do you now, Jane?
A lot lighter, I've got a force 4.
Thank you. And now for some more gymnastics. Cue the drum roll. Well, with that delightful little stunt, Ben has showed us how to use the shoulders in the water start. One more time, please, Ben. You'll see that he throws the shoulders forward and straightens the arms. So not only does he get the rig upright, but he also gets his weight over his feet. So now he can stand up. Watch his shoulders again. On the floaty longboard, he has to make a special effort to get the rig upright. He shoots his arms up and then waits until his shoulders are over his feet before trying to stand up. Now let's look at some details. Getting the back foot on is not as plain as it may seem. First, you must give yourself room by swimming well upwind of the board. Then you just lift the heel on to the windward edge, so that when you rise up, it just straddles the centre line. Your back leg is in fact the most active limb of all. When you go for the up, draw the back of the board upwind and stuff it beneath you to bear it away and reduce the height you have to come up. Fundamental to everything is still your basic stance. Note above all the extended arms and the hands well down the boom, so that you rise up into your normal sailing position. Good water starting is all about timing your effort, especially in the lighter winds. So get the back leg on early to give yourself control over the back of the board. Then keep looking upwind for a wee gust. When you see one, everything works together. The upper body coils forward towards the mast foot, the back leg bends and drives down, and the front leg kicks. Done with suitable vigour, and you should almost get catapulted. Let's have another look at that front leg. This may be a Sid's eye view, but he's not welcome here. Out, Sid, because the front leg should kick like that for lift and stability. Okay, Sid, now it's your turn. So first the stance, and with the hands this far apart, you can't keep the rig forward to hold the board off the wind, and you can't extend it high enough to get the lift. Put them together, and all that changes. It's tempting to try and pull yourself up the last bit before the rig is upright, but stand up too early and bend your arms, and back you go. It doesn't work here, and it doesn't work on dry land. Get the message? Keep the arms extended, and then let the rig pull your weight over the board before trying to stand up. Foot position is often a worry. Some, in an effort to get closer to the board, drape their leg right over the board and end up in a proper tangle. Others feel a need to put the foot flat on the board, but ankles just don't bend like that, so they end up twisting and get thrown out of position. Remember, just rest the heel on the windward edge and you'll come up straight. In moderate winds, it's a mistake to put both feet in the straps, as it makes your upper body fall back and stops you getting the rig upright. And with no part of your body in the water, the board drifts sideways. But leave the front leg in the water and you rise straight up. But this is not the case in strong winds. In a blow, the problem isn't creating lift, but controlling it. So the aim is to get into your secure sailing position as quickly as possible. Keep the sail low to the water. Line the board up on a close reach and then slide both feet into the straps. Then bear away gradually by swinging the body forward. Let the increase in power pull you on, which is just the opposite for the light wind version. There is a freestyle method where you take hold of the mast with the front hand and the foot of the sail with the back hand as a means to get the rig vertical, and then rock over the middle of the board, the feet either side of the mast. It's a bit of fun and variety, but truth to tell, you don't really need it. You can get up in the lightest winds using the normal method so long as you really bend that back leg and deliver tons of mast foot pressure. Light winds are the ultimate test of technique. So now you can get out of the water, we move back to the part many people find the most troublesome and tiring, the rig recovery. But it needn't be so long as you let the wind do the work, like this. I'm only in 2.5 feet of water. However, Jane, weighing a meagre 55 kilograms, will now recover that 6'5" rig I said you shouldn't use as final proof of skill over brawn. She makes it look so easy that you suspect there's someone out of shot giving her a lift. But no, she just encourages the wind to get under the sail and do the hard work for her. The principle is simple. If the mast lies at right angles to the wind can blow under the whole sail and release it for you. Then you use the rig to maneuver the board into position. Grab the mast about 1 meter above the boom with your back hand and then pretend you're throwing a javelin. Launch the rig over your shoulder into wind. The moment the clew releases, transfer that backhand to the boom so you can get power into the rig. In moderate winds, push the sail high up to expose more sail to the wind and then hold it high so it pulls your upper body clear of the water. In stronger winds, keep the rig closer to the water and throw it more into wind to stop the end of the boom catching and prevent yourself getting overpowered. The problem is, of course, that rigs rarely fall conveniently across the wind. If it sinks, set about swimming it across the wind, but at the same time lift it gently to drain the water from the luff and to encourage air to unstick it. When you feel it starting to float, give it the yahoo into wind and up she comes. One of the worst situations is where the mast tip is pointing straight into wind. The best way to get the mast across the wind from here is to swim between the board and rig and pivot them around. Now at least the wind is hitting the mast at a small angle. Then go for the mast a little higher than normal and throw it clear. Alternatively, you can go straight to the tip of the mast and lift it from there. The drawback is that when you lift from the head, you only expose a small area of sail to the wind. So think always about where the wind is coming from, and then about bearing the underside of the sail to the wind. In all these situations, pop the battens around as soon as you can. Air can then get under the foil, and the sail then creates its own lift. Even with the finest technique, this rig recovery still can be a bit of a struggle. So Jane, who's under here for no apparent reason, will now give me a hand. She used the back of the board to float the rig. It's dead easy. You just sink the tail with the front hand and pull the rig over the tail with the back hand. Keep the mast low to the water, and that's it. You can use the back of the board wherever the rig is lying, so here are a few variations. When the mast tip is pointing straight into wind, swing the board around, sink the tail under the boom, and then pivot them around together across the wind. Then the wind blows under the sail, and you're off. When the clew is nearest the back of the board, you have two options, the first of which is the clew flip. Pull the end of the boom up wind a little and lift it up and let the wind flip it over. Then just use the back of the board as before. The other alternative is to use the front of the board. Slide the board back so the mast and board come together, and sink the nose this time and pull the boom across. Then swim towards the back of the board, jibing the sail as you go. A zappy alternative in that same situation is to rise up in the clew first position rather than jibe the sail in the water. And if you can sail normally clew first, it's as easy as it looks. The two main differences are that it's best to start a little broader to the wind than normal, and when you rise up, you must keep the sail open by pushing the front hand, the left hand in this case, up and away from you. Then flip the rig as soon as you're upright. And finally, a tip for those of you without gills, a float coat can save you many a salty mouthful. The most common and infuriating of all rig recovery sins is where the end of the boom gets stuck, leaving you to start all over again. The moment you feel the clew catching, flatten the rig to the water by pulling down violently on the mast. Then prevent a repeat performance by throwing the mast over your shoulder, into wind, not straight up. But sometimes, especially in moderate winds with big rigs, uphauling can be quicker. But on the short board there is a stability problem, and if you pussyfoot around like this and grope for the rig with your bottom out, you get nowhere. As usual, you have to go for it, so first get a wider, more stable stance, with legs bent and the back straight. Then, with the front hand at the top of the rope, let the board head up into wind slightly, and snap it up and sheet in before the board has a chance to sink.
You take overtime, you don't go to this much of it, but the muscles have had to take the slide, you know you don't take much neighbour. If you're not going nowhere, you're going slowly until it is.
So in this the section I'm sure you've all been waiting for. We're going to look at the carved jibe in minute detail and look at a number of exercises to help you spend more time on it rather than underneath it. 7 years ago, I called this the blue ribbon of funboard manoeuvres, and in the meantime, despite the introduction of all manner of zany tricks on and above the water, it remains the most important and eternally challenging manoeuvre in the book. The carved jibe is a technique watershed, in that it demands a whole new approach to the business of turning. In all the manoeuvres up until now, you have used the rig to lean against. In the flare jibe, for example, you sit back and pull the rig back to pivot the board on its tail, and then scoop the rig to provide the turning force. Well, you can forget all that for a start, because the carved jibe is all about speed and using that speed to turn. You don't pull back, but you let the rig pull you forward and then bank everything, board, rig and body, into the turn in a foot-to-the-floor state of mind. Think of it like this. You're not windsurfing at all. You've just been towed along by a speedboat. Like surfing and water skiing, the control and steering come through the knees and ankles, so you've got to get dynamic and be prepared to throw yourself into it. But first, a gear check. We've already set the boards up for stance, which suits our purpose fine today, because without that speed, you just can't carve jibe in the first place. But if you're going out there specifically to crack that first carve jibe, there are a few little things you can do to tweak the boards to make them behave a little bit more kindly, starting with the mast track. On the long board, so long as you're powered up, you need to slide the track right to the back, or near the back, with the dagger board retracted, of course, because only then can you reduce the planing area enough to make a smooth turn. On the short board, it's different. You set the mast track position for sail side, so if you slide it up and down for jibing, you just cause an imbalance. Now onto foot straps. Remember, on the long board, this training set are far too far forward for jibing. You just end up stalling the rail. However, with the back set on both boards, your priority is the same. If you've got these multi-position plugs, remember this. Every inch you move that front strap forward, you engage at least another 4 inches of rail in the water. So if you're heavy and if you've had trouble sinking the tail in the jibe, then this can cure it immediately by flattening the board out. And I, for one, always used to try and jibe with the straps too far back. However, if you're light, then by moving the straps to the back, you can apply more weight to the turning edge. Now remember to leave this space here clear for your jibing foot, so your sets of straps are at least shoulder width apart. And now on to fin choice. The fin, of course, is important in the jibe because it's your pivot point. On the long board, which is supposed to be jibed on a long arc, we tend to stick with that fin that gives the speed and acceleration. On the short board, however, the choice is more critical. On the one hand, you have the upright race fin, a good jibing fin, but you've got to be committed. If you're tentative in any way, it'll straighten you up. At the other extreme, you have the wave fin. Every design feature here is for control and maneuverability, from the sweep, from the cutaway, and of course down to the anti-spin out device. However, it gives very little lift, so it's not much good for our purpose today. In my opinion, the ideal compromise for jibing is this. With the slalom style fin, it's got an upright section in the middle for your power, speed and lift, but that sweep in the tip means it'll track more sweetly through the jibe and you can bank it over harder without it stalling. One of the many problems with the carved jibe is that there's so much to think about in such a short space of time. So we're going to ease that mental burden by slicing it into 3 bits: the approach, the carve, and then the rig and foot change. Let's get one thing straight. You've got to be going fast before you can even think about carving, and fast means locked out in the straps, the board planing right on the back third. And just one little point before we go on. Personally, I find that boards carve badly through fiberglass mylar and flesh, so look downwind and behind you to make sure the road is clear before bearing away. To finish the jibe in style, you have to start with style, and that means unhooking and taking the back foot out well in advance, and then giving yourself a moment to settle down again before leaning into it. Unhook on a beam reach just by taking the pressure on your arms for a second. You don't even have to bend them, and above all, you don't disturb the rig. The back foot movement is very delicate. You lift it out onto the rail right by the back strap, pointing into the turn. It's just on the leeward side of the centre line. Any further across and the toes would be dragging in the water. Now watch the back hand. Just before unhooking, it moves back down the boom slightly. That places it in a far better position to sheet in. It's a crucial aspect of all jibes. Now let's talk anticipation. Jane still manages to carve around in control, overpowered and over steep chop, only because she brings her weight over the board into a position where she can dominate it. You have to anticipate the sudden change in direction, so the last part of your approach is all about getting the weight inboard. At the start, it is right out to windward, committed against the sail. As you bear away, let the rig pull your shoulders and hips right over the centre line. From that position, you can drive the board all the way around. In the carve, the back foot pushes in the leeward rail and holds it in until the turn is finished. A simple enough brief, but it's only feasible if the rest of the body is in position. The shoulders anticipate the turn by toppling forward. The hips and knees then follow. The perfect position is where the hips are forward and the shoulders are always in front of your feet. And yes, we all know we have to bend the knees, but how? Well, you don't just bend them, you drive them forward as one unit into the sail towards the centre of the imaginary turning circle. And they stay bent from start to finish. And as for how much, well, bend them to where you think you should, and then another foot lower, for only then can you stretch and extend them to absorb the lumps. Ultimately, the back foot holds the key to a smooth turn, since it controls the carving angle of the board. The With the body well forward, the action is one of driving off the back foot and pushing the tail out behind you. The degree of that pressure is critical. First, you apply a little to set the edge, and then when you feel the rail bite, you extend the back foot deeper and deeper into the water to keep the board on its edge and tighten the arc. Imagine there is a jibing pedal under the back foot, which you have to push and hold down right to the end. Constant but constantly increasing back foot pressure is the key. As for the arms and rig, first remember the old rule always to keep a distance between boom and body by holding the rig away from you at arm's length. And sheet in all the way through. So as you lean into the jibe, the front arm extends forward as the backhand, well down the boom, bends to pull the rig in. Back arm bent, front arm straight. As for the rig angle, the theory is very simple. Just bank the rig over at the same angle as the board. It's as if the masts were fixed into the board without a UJ. Done properly, and you should have an unobscured view of the front of the board right up until you change the rig. In moderate winds and on longer boards, hold the rig more upright to provide more power. But on short boards in higher winds, when the turn is tighter and the carve is steeper, that lean is more extreme. It looks flat to the floor, but the rig is still at right angles to the board. There are two distinct ways to finish off a jibe. The first is the step jibe version, where the feet are changed before the rig and land in front of the straps. It was once seen as a basic longboard technique, but a more dynamic version of the same technique, known loosely as the slalom jibe, has been developed for shortboards due to the extra control it gives during the last phase of the turn. The other is a long-accepted shortboard strap-to-strap technique, where the rig is released and caught again with the feet in their original carving positions. The feet then move straight into the new set of straps. Let's begin with the foot movement of the step jibe. The foot and rig change are almost simultaneous and happen as you swing on to your new broad reach. At that moment, you open the sail-out clew first and pivot the front foot out of the strap onto the center line. You then sweep the back foot forward of the straps, letting the sail go at the same time. It's very easy to upset the carving angle when you change your feet, especially on a short board. So make sure the movements are subtle and that you keep the weight on the turning edge. Look at the position of the feet just after the change, both on the inside rail with the weight on the heels so the board keeps carving as the rig swings round. Let's look at the timing again. The rig is released the moment the foot lands in its new position. That means there's always something holding the front of the board down. In the strap-to-strap version, however, you don't think about changing the feet until you're sheeted in on the new tack. The timing of the rig change is much the same as the step jibe. You release it on a broad reach. You then sheet in again just a few degrees off the wind. But this is a versatile turn, and if you have good speed and the water is flat, you can go for an early rig release like here, dead downwind. And then let the board float around under its own steam before sheeting in again at the same point as before. The crux of this jibe is to hold the carving position as the sail swings round. You must keep driving the knees and maintain that back foot pressure as the body turns out to face the sail. Knees in, body out. You then flatten the board off as you change the feet. It's that sudden feeling of twist that forces many to straighten up and stop carving, so they're over the centre line when they try to sheet in. It's a technique you can practice in light winds. Sail with the feet the wrong way round and see how far you can twist the upper body round to face the sail and sheet in while still pushing the knees in and weighting the back foot. A supple waist is no disadvantage. It's also crucial to drive forward in this jibe so you don't end up sitting back on the tail. Look at the position of the body at the moment of release. It's right forward, the shoulders in front of the hands and the head almost in line with the mast. So when you sheet in, you take the power and drive it forward into the mast foot. Yes, good old MFP is once again the cure for all ills. And now for a quick look at that foot change. The feet change almost simultaneously, but the new front foot slides straight into the strap. The back foot moves back as soon as the board settles. It's a lightning strike, and done well, the viewer should barely notice the change. A good rig change begins with having the mast in the right position, in front of you and upright, so it can just pivot around with no need for violent adjustment. In the widely used boom-to-boom method, the front hand slides forward towards the mast just before the rig is released. Then, as the rig pivots around, the new front hand reaches underneath it and in you sheet. All crisp, positive movements. Practicing in light winds can do wonders for your fluidity. As a way to make you more positive with the rig change and relinquish that death grip, jibe around and then pull the rig to the balance point and try to clap your hands before grabbing the boom again. In all of these changes, the key lies with the front hand. Even if you prefer undergrip for sailing, change it to overgrip for the jibe. Most important of all is to slide the front hand forward, right up to the mast, so the rig can pivot easily around it. And now with the technique sorted, the final aim is to select the right jibe for the occasion. The problem with going strap to strap in marginal wind is that the rig takes a while to flip round, during which time the tail can sink. By doing the step jibe in the same conditions and getting the feet forward earlier, the board stays flat and keeps going. On the approach, gauge just how well the board is planing, and if as here it's not really up and humming, think immediately about tightening up the arc with back foot pressure and getting forward on the board. The strap-to-strap jibe also shows itself to be vulnerable in heavy chop. With nothing to hold the nose down when the rig is released, it can bounce out of control. Thank you, Ben. In such conditions, the step jibe can be more efficient, since you can get forward earlier and keep the board on the deck. Hence its popularity with slalom racers. Although the strap-to-strap jibe is particularly suited to squirrely small boards, it can be a flowing technique on all lengths of board, especially if the water is flat. And if you're light and tend not to sink tails, it's a technique which will have you planing out of jibes in all conditions. And now, Sid, be gentle with us. Ben kicks us off with this carving classic. Marks out of 10 for commitment, angulation and knee bend, 0. You can't carve or absorb chop with straight legs, so he rapidly bounces to a stop. To carve a smooth arc requires constant pressure on the back foot. The moment you let the foot off the pedal, you go back the way you came. Downwind is the critical stage when you should be carving hardest. If you let the board level out onto a run, it quickly runs out of steam. So keep tightening the arc up all the way round. If you don't sheet in hard, especially when it's bumpy, the board will develop a mind of its own. You all right, Jane? Jibing can be a bit like having the rug pulled from under your feet. So unless you anticipate the acceleration of the turn by getting the body forward, you just drop off the back. To finish with, here are a few rig mishaps. Problems usually begin with bad rig angle. If rather than lean it into the turn, you scoop it a la flare jibe, the rig not only pulls the body to the outside, but also ends up dropping to leeward when you release it. In the rig change, unless you move the front hand forward on the boom right up to the mast, the rig swings right round behind you and up under your armpit. You should sheet the rig in just off a beam reach on the new tack. So if the rig overpowers you when you catch it, you know you did it all too early. On the other hand, if you end up doing half a 360 and get back-winded, you know you did it too late. To the confusion of everybody, booms seem to be moving up and down like yo-yos over the past few years. But I'm glad to say they seem to have settled somewhere between eye and chest height now. There are perhaps two instances when a high boom, shoulder height or above, can be preferable. One is on a long board when the railing effect to windward effectively reduces the distance between your feet and the boom. And the second is on short boards in marginal winds when it's easier to hang down off the rig, increase the pressure through the mast foot and drive the board through the turns without stalling. The chest high option is more versatile. It encourages you to bend your knees in the jibes. It gives you more freedom to move the rig in the windward-leeward plane. It makes water starting easier and helps you adopt an efficient sitting stance with a low centre of gravity. And if you've got a modern clamp-on front end and supreme balance, you can even adjust it as you're going along. But you can't deal with boom height in isolation because the length of your harness line has an equally profound effect on both your posture and weight distribution. The length of your harness lines determine how near or far your centre of gravity is to the centre line of the board, and exactly where you want to be depends on the wind strength and the type of sailing you are doing. A good starting point is to have the depth of the loop at the same length as your forearm. Now you can lower the bottom as if perched on a bar stool, straighten your arms, angulate at the waist, and keep legs slightly bent. Now before the plot thickens, let me introduce you to Sid the Shark, who'll pop up whenever we deliberately show you a technical error. And here's the first one. If the harness lines are too long, you can't sheet in properly. You'll lose control of the back of the board. The line will drop out of the hook on every bump and your arms will tire quickly. Worst of all, you'll encounter the dreaded bum slap, which is about as efficient as towing a bucket. Very short lines limit your movement and force you into a hunched bent arm stance. Unable to angulate at the waist, the natural reaction in strong winds is to pull the whole rig over to windward, thereby reducing the area and killing the power. And, being so close to the rig, you're easy prey to the unforeseen gust. Stance is a highly personal thing, and the fact that the main men and women look so individual on the water suggests that there's more than one way to be a champ. Let's steal a glance then at some of them in action and see how and why they've settled into such a variety of postures. Here's former world record holder Pascal Macca. To cope with the gusty winds and sizable swell of the Sotavento speed track, Pascal adopts a more compact stance than normal, using a chest-high boom and a medium-length line. His relatively high hook allows him to maintain a low centre of gravity while still keeping a lot of weight on his feet to hold the board in the water. His bent back leg is always in motion to maintain the perfect trim angle. The original king of speed, Fred Hayward, another big man, uses a lower hook to make best use of his ample bulk and adopts a more solid position with straighter legs. Eric Beale, current world record holder and a much lighter sailor, uses a completely different style. Hooked into incredibly short lines, he pushes his hips forward throws his shoulders back and extends his arms to stand upright and straight-bodied. It's a position which concentrates his weight over the board and allows him to hold perfectly still. But being so close to the rig, he has little room to manoeuvre. It's a stance which works particularly well on flat water speed canals. Very different again is the classic slalom style of Bjorn Dunkerbeck. Through the use of very long lines, his weight is not acting down over the board, but is dropped much further to windward, allowing him to drive against the rails to increase the lift from the fin. Stance is influenced, of course, by body shape. Torkel Christensen makes use of a high gorilla factor, long arms and legs, to extend his centre of gravity a long way to windward. The use of an elasticated harness hook allows him to angulate to the extreme without the need for miles of harness rope. And to hell with the pain as the hook twangs against his chest if he unhooks by mistake. Smaller folk have to make up for bulk with good technique, or else they can play big by wearing a weight jacket. With 5 kilograms of water strapped to his shoulders, Eric Thiem is increasing his effective weight by as much as 15 kilograms, whilst doing his back no good at all. So what are the key points to going fast? Well, you've got to anticipate. React to gusts before they get you. Look ahead at the water's surface and use a subtle knee and ankle action to iron out the bumpy terrain and keep the board planing on the water at the same angle. And get aggressive, or in a relaxed sort of way. Sheet in hard, drive the board hard, but don't fight the rig. Don't dig into the straps, but give to the power and let the sail pull you along. Yeah, just give the horse its head. Sailing fast is one thing. Getting on the plane in the first place is quite another. And let's face it, these short boards aren't a lot of fun when you're up to your ankles in water. Now, we've seen already how big fins and deeply cambered sails can provide a lot of lift, but some people are still amazed how apparently very heavy sailors can still get on the plane very early. So let's look now and see what you can do to improve your acceleration. Scudding up onto the plane relies on you being dainty of foot and on taking your weight off the board and then using the lift from the fin to help the tail rise up and release. The secret lies in balancing the forces between feet and mast foot in such a way that the board remains at the same angle even as it's accelerating. Bend the knees as you sheet in, swinging forward to increase the mast foot pressure and prevent tail sink. Then bring more and more weight back onto your feet as the board picks up speed. Check the progress of the feet down the board. The back foot stays on the center line between front and back straps, where toe pressure trims the board flat. Then, hanging off the rig, slip the front foot into the strap and, unless it's very windy, wait until you're nearing top speed before moving the back foot into its strap. Be sure not to close the slot off too early. Not only could you luff up, but you're in danger of oversheeting and stalling. Above all, leave the rig forward on extended arms as you move back down the board. Then draw it back slowly and only aim to close the slot off completely when you've reached maximum speed. To get away swiftly from a standing start, you have to sheet in before you spring aboard so that the mast foot pressure can compensate for the shock of your feet landing on the tail. Rachel moves her front foot straight into the strap but leaves the back foot floating loose to trim the board, electing only to move it back when her speed is up or trouble threatens. Windsurfing isn't one continuous race. It's just that the board is much easier and less tiring to sail when it's on the plane. And if you can settle into your stance the moment a gust arrives, you can enjoy all the fun of the fair. Here's the most useful, simplest and most neglected tip of all. If you want to go upwind, bear away first to accelerate. Pumping is a good way to improve acceleration or kill it stone dead. The golden rule is that you only pump to help the board onto the plane, but once it's on the plane, the most efficient position for the rig is upright and still.
When pumping in planing conditions, you work the sail and the board simultaneously. Pull down on the rig to unweight the board, and then shoot it forwards with your legs, rocking it from side to side to stick it from the water and feed air into the concaves. Then lock out. Now, watch this.
Ouch. Well, the skeg's still there, so I must have spun out again. Spin out. For those who haven't tried it, there you are, going along at a fair rate, and suddenly someone cuts your skeg off. Well, that's what it feels like. In fact, the back of the board's just broken away, you're slipping sideways, and then you'll drop into windward probably. Well, the bright side of it is that to spin out, you've got to go quite fast, and so at least you're doing something right. But generally, it's the sticky end to what could have been a perfect day. And if you keep on doing it, well, you start to sail with less and less confidence, and your manoeuvres become very sticky and jilted. So, what are the causes? Well, normally, we tend to blame our equipment. But in the case of spin out, 9 times out of 10, I'm afraid it is pilot error.
So what exactly did happen just now? It looked as if ventilation was responsible for this catastrophe. Air is sucked down the board and attaches itself to the low pressure side of the fin, causing the pressures to equalize and the fin to lose its grip. The problem usually starts when the seal between the back of the board and the water is broken, as happened here. By sheeting out as I hit a piece of chop, I allowed the front of the board to lift out of the water, and as I sheet in again, the fin, trapped within a bubble of air, offers no resistance, and sideways we go. Excess back foot pressure is responsible for the second cause of spin out, which is simple stall. If the sideways force exerted on the fin is so large that the water strikes the leading edge of the fin at too great an angle, the water detaches itself from the foil, leaving the fin once again in a pocket of air. Stall can occur at quite low speeds. Landing slightly into wind after jumps is a common cause, as is pushing too hard in the white water, which is 90% air anyway. So what are the remedies? Well, prevention is always better than cure. Torkel Christensen looks in perfect shape to spin out as his fin lifts the board clear of the water. But by increasing the mast-up pressure and decreasing the pressure on his back foot, he restores the trim angle and continues on his way. In chop, be careful not to oversheet and try to maintain board-water contact by pre-jumping the wavelets. And if you do get a little air, try to land with the weight on both feet equally. If the fin does let go, your first corrective measure is to bear away by dragging the tail under your bottom to bring the fin into a workable angle of attack. At slow speeds, the flow often sorts itself out immediately. During a high-speed skid, just hang on tight, keep the board flat to stop it tripping over the leeward rail, and slow right down to a near standstill to allow the water to reattach itself to the foil. And in the most extreme cases, it's here. You just have to brush the air off and start again.
Oh, hi Phil. Why are you wearing that ridiculous blazer? There's a huge difference between getting a tick in the I've done a jibe column and performing them with any verve, panache and regularity. The fact that the world's best sailors will spend seasons perfecting this one manoeuvre reveals there's an awful lot to it. It's not just a case of coping with the variables such as wind strength and board design, which Phil and Philippe mentioned earlier, but with actually exploiting those variables to produce an even more dynamic performance. So much of the skill relies on knowing your equipment, knowing how far you can push it, and then jibing to its strengths. So in this section, we'll be looking at turns on
The slalom board, with its incredible board speed and long, hard edges, will be climbing onto wave boards, which just love to be driven hard through the turns, and even on speed boards, which if you stamp on too heavily, will throw you off like a frisky stallion. Now, all these boards can be jibed if your basic technique is sound. So let's start by recapping on the essential points of the basic shortboard jibe. The shortboard jibe is won and lost in the preparation phase. So unhook in plenty of time, and with the back foot on the leeward rail, let the rig pull you up over the centre line. Then body and rig drive towards the centre of the turning circle, so that when you release the rig downwind, everything is hanging to the inside. The feet then maintain the trim by staying in the same position until you've sheeted in again on the new tack. It all looks so delightfully simple, so how do we find so many ways to mess it up? Well, hanging back, playing safe, and generally being a bit of a wimp is perhaps the most common malaise. In this dire demo, the first error is to sheet out. He then kills the power and momentum completely by bending the arms, straightening the legs, sinking the tail and pulling the rig over his head. The result is not so much a screeching carve as a very tentative, slow wobble. By contrast, the next approach reveals too much flamboyance, but the results are just as damp. The board is never allowed to settle, and rather than maintain even pressure on the back foot, he just keeps stamping on the tail, which bounces up and down like a cork, and finally chucks him off. A destructive hangover from longboard days is the overwhelming desire to scoop the rig to windward as a way to help the board turn. Don't. It pulls your upper body out of position and forces you to stand upright. And when the time comes to flip the rig, you'll find it behind you and to leeward, where it sends you spinning into wind, knocking you off on the way. Now let's sort these problems out. Firstly, stay sheeted in to maintain mass-up pressure and stop the board bouncing. Always hold the rig forward and at arm's length. Stay one step ahead of the board and bend knees and ankles to absorb the chop. Release the rig when the board is going at its fastest and sheet in before it has a chance to slow down. And only hook in again when you're comfortable and planing. Commitment starts with the hips, which lead the body forward at the entry to the turn. Try to touch the water with your back knee and resist the temptation to stand up as you flip the rig. But it's this blunt refusal to lean the rig into the turn which is so many people's stumbling block. So as you enter the jibe, imagine you have no UJ, so that the board and rig bank over at the same angle. If you can see the front of the board past the mast, you're doing it right. If the sail is in the way, you're guilty of scooping. A slick boom-to-boom rig change is only possible if you enter with speed and give yourself room. The backhand throws the boom away and crosses over the front hand to grab the new side. With confidence and timing, the maneuver becomes a release and catch, with both hands landing on the boom simultaneously. On all shortboards, but especially wave boards, the turning circle can be tightened by increasing back foot pressure. But because everything is speeded up, the timing of the rig release and the foot change are even more critical. Keep the weight pressing forward and move the feet in front of the straps to avoid luffing into wind. In slalom, the jibe marks are where the lead most commonly changes hands, so he or she who cuts the fastest, tightest jibe, hugging the inside slot, often reaps the reward. On or off the slalom course, many speedsters choose a sail which places them on the upper limits of control. The slalom jibe aims to harness and exploit that power and is hence a dynamic exaggeration of the basic technique. The most noticeable differences are the extreme oversheeting, the radical rig lean, and the hard, flat carve. You use the power of the rig to drive the board all the way through the turn, along its inside edge. You therefore exit clew first and change the feet before flipping the rig. And with the feet well forward of the straps, you are perfectly set up to pump the sail and show the fleet the backside of your harness. But attempting a tight carve with a big rig can result in you getting overpowered and the foot of the sail hitting the water. See how Bjorn Dunkerbeck reaches right down the boom with his backhand and then cranks the sail in over the centre line. He's killed some of the power and can now carve the board as hard as he likes. As he turns through the wind, he changes his feet and flattens the board off. He then throws the rig upright to gain an extra surge before flipping the rig and deciding which side he will overtake his oppressor. But there are occasions, usually when you're in the lead, that a wide slalom jibe is preferable. With a comfortable cushion, Bjorn Dunkerbeck now bears away gradually and then stretches the arms and upper body forwards. The rig, sheeted in but not over-sheeted, pulls the board through the turn. In that instance, he didn't dump power, but used every drop available. Now, who are we to start offering advice to the world champion? But in this case, had his feet been further forward, the board may have stayed on the water. In chop or breaking surf, there's a danger of losing control of the board as you flip the sail and release the mass of pressure. He was obviously just showing off. In marginal wind, it's easy to let unsubtle foot and rig pressure sink the back of the board. Your fastest course in such conditions is tight to the wind, so jibe tight, oversheet as before, and most importantly lean forward onto the boom to increase mast foot pressure and keep the nose down. Then with the front foot right up by the mast, you can trim the board flat and work it back onto the plane. Don't they make it look easy? The thing about speedboards is there's nothing of them. They're so sensitive to weight transfer that you only have to flex a buttock when they start to turn. The trick is to control your speed, jibe in a very long arc and maintain an even carving angle. To get the board back onto the plane, you must slip back into the straps as soon as possible and pump against the fin. On choppy water, the aim in the jibe is not to be dynamic so much as to survive. Thanks to the narrow tail, you are liable to pivot into winds the moment you jibe the sail. So release the rig early, hold it forwards, and if you feel yourself dropping off the plane, move the feet well up the board. If you try to come out clew first, you'll sink without trace.
In life, as in windsurfing, there are certain things that are essential, and others which are simply considered desirable. Cheers. The shortboarder, for example, who can't carb jibe, finds things very frustrating, and they quickly become very good at water starting. It's a manoeuvre that's considered essential to sail the board. They don't, however, need to be able to duck jibe or perform 360s to be considered competent. But the challenge is not only in polishing up what you can do, but also in learning what you can't. So once you've mastered those basic techniques, let's have a look at how we can improve on them to learn some of those tricky transitions. So very impressive. Always assuming it works.
Well, as Phil mentioned, we are now entering the more athletic domain of windsurfing, but that's not to say that anyone with shortboard skills can't master the following manoeuvres. Remember, though, that you are going to be doing this on your shortboard, which is particularly sensitive to any changes in rig and foot pressure. So I'm afraid to say, without depressing you too much, that if you were to go out on the water straight away and try, say, a duck jibe in strong winds, then you've got about that much chance of pulling it off. What we've got to do is somehow build up some awareness and anticipation of the manoeuvre before going out and giving it a go. Now remember that all these skills have longboard counterparts. So to go out in light winds on your longboard, try the rig change, try the foot change, is going to help you a great deal. Or, as I'm going to do shortly, get on a shortboard on the beach and try it there. And this is going to be especially useful for the first manoeuvre we're going to look at, the duck jibe.
As you saw from the sequences, in the duck jibe we pass under the sail rather than letting it swing round the front. Now, for the hand movements, we see two main methods of this, either the shuffle, grab, splash, or as we prefer, 4 crisp hand movements to get you to the new side of the boom. Now, the key point is the front hand, which is going to be this one. That must pass under the sail and get to the new side of the boom in front of the balance point as quickly as possible, because once it's there, you can control the rig and spill wind. Now, let's try this on dry land. First of all, we need some wind. There it is. And off we go. Backhand, first of all, creeps down the boom just before now you reach the downwind position. The front hand then crosses over and takes hold of the boom right at the end. Now here's the key point. You're leaning in and you've got to pretend you've got a flea in your ear and you want to brush it off with your shoulder. So staying low and ducking, hence the name, you pull back it as hard as you can while the front hand reaches right forward, takes hold of the boom at the front, backhand now sheets in, and you power out of the turn before changing your feet. Now, the alternative is when you don't get your front hand far enough down the boom. As the boom swings round, you end up with a gob boom. It also encourages you to lean back. Now, I know I'm not impressing anybody by mucking around on the sand, so let's get out on the water and look at the other elements of body position and timing. Looking at a sailor about to jibe, you shouldn't be able to tell whether he is going to do a duck or a straight carve until he releases the rig. The carving action is the same, and in both the rig is angled into the turn and sheeted in. Throughout the arc, the body is committed to the inside. Now watch the rig action from the centre of the circle. The backhand throws the boom back so the front hand can take hold in its normal place. The sail is now under control. You release the rig when it feels lightest, namely on your fastest point of sailing. In marginal winds, that will be just off the wind, getting broader and broader as the wind increases. Thankfully, the symptoms of mistimed attempts are easy to recognise. If you release the rig too early, the front end of the boom smacks the water to leeward, the board stops, but you don't. If you release the rig too late, the board slows down, the sail back wins, and you end up trying to catch the boom on a run. And if you're going too slowly, you can time nothing except the exact moment of your fall. But if your speed is good and your timing is right, the rig will float round and you can use the sail to power yourself out of the turn before changing your feet. And now for some unabashed posturing. The one-hander is a good way to check your technique. On the way to the new side of the boom, the backhand strokes the water to the inside of the turn, approximately level with your back foot. Or you can try this very neat variation. Start the jibe in the normal way, but then change your feet first. Lay back into the turn, depressing the inside rail with the heels, then change the rig. And they'll wonder what on earth you've done.
Now, what am I doing out here on a longboard in the middle of the shortboard sequences? Well, the next manoeuvre on offer the slam jibe is a simple progression from the longboard flare jibe. It's the way we turn the board round on the spot without losing any ground downwind. Now, sadly, to learn it, you have to commit all those horrendous carve jibbing errors like scooping the rig, bending the arms and leaning back. But done correctly on a shortboard, it's not only very spectacular, but it's also an extremely useful manoeuvre to have in your repertoire.
Unlike the carve jibe, when you try to go with the flow, in the slam jibe, you pull against it and use that force in the rig to spin you on your tail. The slam jibe is a technique that can prove handy in a number of situations, not least in the surf when you need to turn tightly between the waves. It's an altogether more stable alternative to the carve jibe, especially in iffy, lumpy conditions. If you're going too fast, the board will skip out when you jump on the tail, so slow right down before sheeting in hard and driving the tail into the water with the back foot. Head into wind before sinking the back of the board, then scoop the rig slightly to windward and resist the sudden forces in the front of the sail by leaning to the inside. Then kill the rotation by moving the feet forward and driving your weight down through the mast foot. The further you move the back foot towards the tail and the more you scoop the rig, the faster you pivot until ultimately you are spinning around just on the fin. The aerial jibe is windsurfing's most abused manoeuvre, being seen as a spectacular shortcut to stardom. But in reality, turning the board around in midair and then crumpling in a heap is much easier than executing a smooth carve jibe. Whereas landing and sailing away, well, that's something else altogether. The first step is to integrate a simple jump with the clue first water start. Start by lifting the board out to the water and driving the tail away with the back foot, aiming to land bottom first near the windward rail. If you take off on a broad reach, you will travel sideways in the air and almost certainly spin out on landing. So with your back foot out of the strap, look for a piece of chop and head into wind so that the board can turn around its own axis and land stationary. And to prevent the sail being ripped out of your hands, aim to land just off the wind. To control the rotation of the board in the air, leave the front foot in the strap and place the back foot right on the tail. Landing with the feet in their original positions can tweak the knees a bit. Those with dicky joints may prefer to change the feet just before touchdown. The 360 should be relatively simple. After all, it's just a couple of carve jibes stuck together. Yet it can remain tantalizingly elusive as you discover a multitude of ways of not quite pulling it off. On the road to success, concentrate on rig angle and the movement of the front foot. As you carve onto a broad reach, lay the rig right down and draw it behind you, lifting up with the backhand to keep the sail open. As the board loses speed, sweep the front foot forward right up to the mast foot. And to steer the board through the wind, trim it flat and angle the rig back over the skeg. Then as you come head to wind, let the rig blow upright, fall back against the sail and kick the nose off the wind. On flat water, it is possible to carve the board all the way round. The trick is to keep the speed up by starting with a long arc and then tighten it up as you go round. The roots of most mistakes lie in a wayward rig action. In this case, trying to lift the rig too early results in a high-scoring backflip, whereas laying the rig too low and then straightening out the back arm effectively oversheets the sail and it stalls. Think about sailing the board through the last 180 by keeping the sail open and controlling the power by pulling up with the backhand. If you're doing it right, the foot of the sail should be brushing the scabs off the shin of your back leg. Once the sail is upright and your weight is in the middle of the board, you can take as long as you like to finish it off. Stepping round the front of a longboard isn't the trickiest of transitions, and if you can do it with just a little speed and flair, then doing the same on a short board is potentially quite easy, as long as you can cope with its irritating habit of disappearing beneath you. As with most shortboard transitions, the aim in the carve tack is to stay over the board's most buoyant section. So prepare by moving the feet in front of the straps, and then land in the same position on the new tack before bearing away. With the front hand on the mast, lean the rig back, keeping it upright and away from you on extended arms. Then move the front foot right up to the mast. The moment you land on the new side, sheet in and throw the rig forward, being sure to keep your weight on the back foot.
The helicopter tack's a good technique to practice in quite light winds when the pressures in the rig aren't quite so severe. With the feet in front of the straps, keeping the board level, you're going to go into it as if you're going to do a normal tack. So get the eye of the nose, eye of the board through the wind first, before sweeping the rig forward. This is a difficult part, controlling the sail from the other side. So use the backhand to ease the power in and out. Now for the transition bit, my front foot's going to sweep back behind the mast, and the back foot's going to change to land just behind the mast, like that. So you're now in the clew first position, and at your leisure you can just flip the rig and keep on sailing.
Although it looks more difficult, the helicopter or spin tack is one of the safest ways of tacking a shortboard because you always have power in the sail, even when you're twirling. It's all about timing and weight transfer. Move the feet forward as the board slows down, place the front foot in front of the mast and steer the nose right through the wind by pulling the clew over the centre line. Then to fill the sail from the other side, sweep it forward and to windward, transferring more weight to the front foot. And as the nose bears away onto a beam reach, push the clew through the wind, pivot around with the rig and flip it in the normal way. Helicopter tacking also opens up an exciting new world of dismounts. One popular gaff is getting so close to the rig that you have no room to sheet in and out. Another is trying to spin too early. If you tend to lose control during the latter stages, try stopping in the clew first position. It gives you something to fall against, and you can steady yourself before flipping the rig. True to its name, the nose sink tack requires you to bury the front end to induce a pivoting action, after which well-timed sheeting and some fancy footwork will have you swiftly pointing in the opposite direction. Once you've carved into wind, place the front foot well in front of the mast with the back foot just behind it. Then drive the nose under and push it through the wind. Quickly move the new back foot down the board, let the rig pull you upright into the clew first position, and do the flip. If the board isn't through the wind before you stamp on the front, you end up doing the nose sink, but no tack. Because the board pivots at a standstill, there will be a lot of power in the sail. To withstand it, hold the rig upright, and remember that you can sheet out at any stage if things are getting away from you. And then only move your feet once you have the rig back under control. In strong winds especially, the rig often gets ripped out of your hands as you arrive clew first, because you've spun too close to the wind, making the leech desperately unstable. If you kick the nose further round onto a beam reach or broader, the flow will settle down immediately and the rig will feel infinitely more controllable.
Finally, for the trickiest and currently trendiest of the shortboard transitions, the duck tack. Now this has been popular on longboards for years, but on the shortboard things change slightly. It's a feature of all tacks that the board stops when you reach the eye of the wind, and so we now have to do the transition earlier or risk just sinking and not being able to do it at all. Right, now let's see how it works on the beach. First of all, we need some wind, and then we get into our normal stance, powered up in the straps. Now you'll find that many of the movements are exactly the same as the duck jibe, except of course you're carving upwind rather than downwind. The first thing to do therefore is change the feet. The front foot sweeps out of the strap and the new front foot moves forward to the middle of the board just behind the mast foot, where it can keep the board flat. Now with the sail transition, the rig's going to be thrown forwards to windwards towards the water. The front hand, just like in the duck jibe, then moves right to the end of the boom, and before the front of the boom does hit the water, it pulls back hard, you've ducked under the sail, and the sail will fill from the other side, and you control the power. Now let's see if it works. My goodness, it did. And from here, you just control the power of the backhand, just like a 360, steer the board through the wind, lean back against the sail, and sail away. Now let's see how it looks on the water.
Unless you relish a row of wheeled marks across your back, select a sail for the duck tack with a high foot profile, for the easier it is to pass under the foot, the more chance you have of controlling the sail as it fills on the new tack. Carve up wind in a long arc and do the sail transition on a close reach. Change the feet round and immediately launch the mast towards the water, grabbing the end of the boom with the front hand, then pull back. The board should be head to wind by the time the sail fills from the new side, then just fall against the sail and bear away. And here's a shark-infested attempt of the first order. Watch the board trim. When I swap the feet round, I place them way too far back, thereby sinking the tail and stopping the board dead. I also throw the rig too far back, so it fills from the wrong side, leaving it flat on the water and the ego slightly bruised. Everything starts well here. The foot change, the board trim, the speed and timing all look spot on. But because he failed to pull back with the front hand, he loses it to windward. There'll be no problems this time. It's worth picking up on the wide foot positions, which give the agile shortboard trickster a stable base to recover from all manner of near misses. And with that little portfolio of stunts successfully cracked, it's time to retire to a secluded paradise where he can invent some more.
For many people, advanced quite inaccurately implies short. And of course you do need a high degree of skill to sail a shortboard in waves, but equal skills needed to master the challenges of a longboard. And modern longboards are fast, they're light, they're exciting to sail, and of course they're very manoeuvrable. Unlike this chap here. They also open up a whole new range of possibilities, the thrills of course racing, for example.
Well, as you saw, in some cases there's very little difference between a water start and an involuntary body drag. Those sailors out there have practiced so much that the moment the body goes past that point of no return, alarm bells ring and they plan the next water start even before they've hit the water. Now, whether the sea is shark-infested or not, there's no point spending any more time in it than is absolutely necessary. So here are some tips on how to plan your falls and make light of those little errors of balance. There's nothing like a bout of competition to make you bounce from the water, especially when every second spent swimming means lost places, and at this level, money. Following that blinding attack of incompetence, it looks like curtains for this frantic Frenchman, but within a microsecond he is up and on his way without losing a place. Perfect, which is more than can be said for the jibe. So how did he get up so quickly? Well, as he falls, the rig flips and the board turns over. But by pushing up immediately on the boom, he rights the board and stops the sail sticking to the water. He then reaches out to the tail of the board with his back foot, drags it under his bottom, and rises up clew first before jibing the sail and pumping onto the plane. Jibes are a great way to practice water starts. If you fall to windward, try to keep hold of the rig, throw it skywards the moment you hit the water, and keep your feet on or near the board. With a leech pointing into wind, the rig will feel unstable. Control it by opening out the front arm, and then pull down with the hand nearest the mast to leave yourself up. Here the mast tip lands straight into wind, but because the patterns are rotated upwards, air has been trapped under the sail, and a quick push up with the front hand is all that's needed. Had he lingered, he would have had to swim the mast all the way across the wind before trying to fly it. The longer you leave the sail in the water, the harder it is to release, especially when others drop in to lend a hand. Lift the mast to drain the water from the sleeve and immediately push the battens up. Wind can then flow under the camber and you'll soon be on your way, if only to collect the wooden spoon. For stability and lift, it's advisable to leave one leg in the water, usually the front one. But in a blow, you can start with your feet in the straps and then rise straight up into your sailing position. And if you've dropped the rig on the downwind side, you can feed air straight under the sail by dragging it across the back of the board. Looks delicious, doesn't it? Strong winds flatter the part-time water starter. Light winds expose all your technical flaws and your juicy limbs. But ignore that empty feeling. In light winds, line the board up on a beam reach and tread water like a mad thing to keep the body upright. You might try putting the front leg on first if it's your strongest one. Then throw the rig up forward on your fingertips and rise up under the boom. When the wind is so light that not even that will work, you'll have to resort to the mast and sail technique. Grab the foot of the sail with the back hand and the mast with the front hand, and then, scrunched up like a ball with feet either side of the mast, rock up forwards over your knees. Note how the backhand grabs the boom before the mast passes the vertical and falls to leeward. Water starting speed boards is a bit like trying to water ski behind a boat with too small an engine. Keep the board flat and encourage the tail to rise by placing the front foot right up by the mast. Hold the rig forward and make your way gradually towards the straps as you pick up speed.
Now, as we've seen since we've been on the island of Forteventura, some of the beaches, and particularly the one here at Sotavento, are strictly playgrounds for the experts. The predominantly strong offshore winds mean that they give very good flat water sailing conditions, but of course they can be dangerous. Now, if you're sailing in company with good safety cover, then that needn't be a problem. Cross and cross offshore winds give ideal shortboard sailing conditions. Remember, though, that there's no need to venture more than 400 metres off the beach to get the very most of those conditions, irrespective of the wind direction.
But Phil, it says here in the book, don't go out in offshore winds. But who's going to tell this lot that they've got to stay on the beach? And come to think of it, they're in less danger than a novice in a Force 2 because they are mentally, physically and technically equipped to cope. Safety and well-being stem from having the right kit for the day and then using it at a location where you don't feel mortally threatened. You learn nothing when in survival mode, but if you're happy and relaxed, you perform. Before you brave the fray, consider what can go wrong with your gear. If you prepare yourself for the worst, you won't be crippled with fear when the unthinkable happens. For example, broken mast feet are responsible for more rescues than anything else. One thing you can do is to pass a piece of rope under the deck plate, lash it to the mast foot, then you can limp home either sailing or in the water start position. If you stay within the surf line, you can drop out of the sky and shatter your accessories to your heart's content, in the knowledge that you will eventually be washed ashore. But your biggest danger will be other people. You have right of way when going out through the waves, but still give everyone a wide berth. It only takes the smallest wave to completely hide a boredom sailor, so always keep an eye on the troughs ahead. But it's not the strong winds that always cause the problems.
Right, I'm now living out one of the shortboarder's worst nightmares, being caught out to sea with the wind dropping. No planing wind here at all, so you've got to be able to sail your shortboard back in light winds. First thing to do, if you've got an adjustable track, then put it in the middle. That'll help flatten the board out. And of course you've got to alter your stance. The front foot, put that right up by the mast foot, and the back foot in front of the back strap, so you can keep the board level and stand over the point of maximum buoyancy. The next thing is getting upwind. Well, you want to try and use what gusts there are as much as possible, so keep looking over the shoulder. And when you see one, bear away into it a little bit, then bring the board up into wind and use what little lateral resistance it's got. So dig in the windward rail, that acts like a dagger board, like this, and you can actually make pretty good progress close to the wind, albeit quite slowly. The main thing is anticipating any wind changes, looking upwind the whole time to see the lulls and the gusts, and using very, very delicate trim of the feet. You will have to turn around sometimes too, and the technique to use is a very steady sort of longboard flare tug type, changing the feet very early, keeping the weight right in the middle of the board, and thank God for that, I'm round. Sheet in as quickly as you can to get the power back in, and I'm home.
Okay, clever Dick, but what if you do fall in and there's not enough wind to water start and you haven't got an uphaul? Well, you can use a harness line. Uphauling small boards must be a snappy affair. With the front foot just in front of the mast and the back foot well back by the front straps, yank the rig up towards your front shoulder so you can grab the mast, throw the rig forward and sheet in all in one movement. And the feet balance the board like a seesaw. Okay, now you really can go home.
Now, as I said in the introduction, things have moved on remarkably in the last few years, and I hope that we've shown that's generally the case. But it can be specifically applied to what's been happening in the waves. The pioneers have pushed back the barriers, knowledge and understanding have improved, and of course, equipment's changed to keep pace with the developments. And what all this means is that what was thought impossible just 5 years ago is now well within the bounds of reality for lots of people. Now, you may have no aspirations or particular desires to jump off mast-high waves and do forward loops, but a basic knowledge of jumping and landing will be useful to you, however infrequently you manage to expose yourself to the sea.
Those glorious dreams of exploding off the top of a cresting roller and then soaring into wind-powered flight all too often end up as a tangled, broken heap on the beach as the sea spits you out whence you came. Now, getting through the shore break relies on good timing, a cool head, and a little bit of bottle.
A certain law rules around the shore break. Firstly, it dictates that as soon as you launch, the water disappears. Then, as you sheet in, the wind either drops or it seems you're hit by a massive gust. And when you do finally stride out with confidence, the rig under control, the board lined up perfectly in the right depth of water, the biggest, gnarliest dump of the day arrives on cue to bludgeon you into submission. But you can win. Just survey the wave pattern from the beach and wait for a lull. Then walk towards the front line without hesitation and stand on the upwind, upwave side of the board and rig and hold them well above the water. Stop just before the impact zone and stand your ground. Let a wave wash through you and then launch on the back of it into the deep water behind. Slide into the straps as quickly as possible and bend the knees to ride the lumps and control the gusts. In and amongst the white water, the wind is always fickle. If it deserts you when you most need it, hang on to the boom and use the rig to shove the nose of the board through the waves. Then wait for a puff before launching again and stand well forward until you're planing. And if you do lose the rig in the path of destruction and there's no time to recover it, then point the tip of the mast at the wave, hang on tight and sink it deep. When coming back in through the minefields, time your run so you're sailing between the waves. As the wave in front breaks, sail up the back of it, get off before the fin grounds, then scarper before you're sucked back in.
This jumping business really isn't as difficult as it looks. The problem is that as soon as the fin leaves the water, the board loses its lateral resistance and left to its own devices will spin straight into wind and land in a heap. So this is totally avoidable once you've learned to overcome your basic desire to bail out and once you've learned to coordinate your 3 points of contact. That is to say, your back foot, your front foot and the mast foot.
The feet are responsible for steering the board in the air by using a push-pull action, while the mast foot, by pushing down or lifting up on it, controls the angle of the board in the air. So let's look at the beginning of a jump. The thing to remember is that you're going to sail the board through the air. So as you enter the airways, you simply sit back against the rig, drop your weight right to windward, and keep sheeted in. Then you drag the back of the board up under your bottom using your back foot and stretch away with the front one. That bears the board away, all the time keeping pressure on the mast foot to keep the board off the wind. Then on landing, you simply bend your legs to absorb the shock. Now, as for practicing jumping, you'd think waves were essential, but in fact they're nothing but a nuisance early on. So let's go out onto the water now and see how by using your various lift devices you can get some very serious airtime on flat water. Timing is the key. If you can lift with arms and legs the moment you hit a piece of chop and present the underside of the board to the wind, you'll be airborne in no time. Get the board bouncing with rhythm by pumping the sail and pushing down with the feet. Then punch up the front arm, pull up the feet and lift the windward rail. In the waves, the effects of sheeting out in mid-air are plain to see. So to make that essential transition from passenger to pilot, you have to open your eyes for a start so you can look ahead and aim to hit the steepest part of the wave on a beam reach. On takeoff, the rig, sheeted in, is pulled slightly to windward. The legs perform that scissor action, the bottom drops to fin level, the undercarriage is lowered, and you land just off the wind. Flat landings shatter knees and boards, but by landing tail or nose first, much of the shock is absorbed. Tail first is easier. At the apex of the jump, release the mast with pressure by sheeting out and extend the back foot towards the water. You'll lose a bit of speed, but it won't hurt a bit. To spot it nose first, stay sheeted in at the top of the jump. The weight of the rig flattens the board off and drives the nose down. Then just bend the knees, and because there's more volume in the nose, you tend to maintain your speed. By leaning forward onto the rig, you can force the board into a vertical dive, but to avoid a messy ending, extend the legs the moment the nose touches the water. In tightly spaced waves, it can be hard work getting to the big ramps on the outside with any speed, so try to flatten out the smaller waves, keep looking ahead, and even jump two at a time. So now you've got your wings, it's time to add a little style and individuality. So why not start by smashing the fin with the back of your head? If you abhor violence, try the gentler one-handed variation. Quite easy, so long as you stay hooked in with your weight committed against the rig. You can drop the backhand or the front hand, because it's all about free expression, just like riding the waves back in. Wave riding in its purest form involves a series of long and short radius turns, and with the odd body drag thrown in, on the unbroken section of the wave face. Cross and cross-offshore winds allow you to ride facing the wave. The goal is to perform the manoeuvres on the steepest, fastest part of the wave, just in front of the white water. And when you've used it all up, you can depart with a transition of your choice. The bottom turn is like the entry to a slalom jibe. In the cutback, you snap the board around by sheeting in and sinking the tail. Timing is once again everything. If you miss your cue, the boat will carry on without you. As you bear off into your bottom turn, look through your window down the wave to spot the peak, and then use the pitching lip to crack the board around. With good timing and aggression, you won't need a big wave to produce a dynamic performance. By pumping the rig and driving off the back foot, he breaks the fins out of this wavelet before bringing the board back to heel. The snappy top turn is easier to control if you leave the back foot in its strap, but try moving it forward again for the long bottom turn. In strong winds, it's all too easy to outrun the waves. On days when the sets are spasmodic, keep an eye on the horizon, and when you see a set, stall the board. When the wave picks you up, bear diagonally off down the face so you can accelerate without shooting out in front.
Now you've got the basic jump wired, you can become a fully paid up member of the aerial revolution. But just how far you can take your flying career from here will depend on you always knowing which way up you are. spatial awareness, as we call it. If you've got it, well, the sky's literally the limit. If you haven't, well, you can look forward to some very interesting landings.
There is no better place to start the inversion trail than with a donkey kick. It's the leap where you kick the tail into wind and then draw it back underneath you as you start to drop. On takeoff, it helps to pull the rig back, rotate slightly into wind, and sheet out to the top of the jump. The step on from here is the tabletop, where you present the underside of the board to the gods. You have to twist so much at the waist that it's hard to keep hold of the rig, and this does not augur well for a smooth landing. And here we go, loopy-loo. Let's start with the backward barrel roll. It's relatively safe, but it's still only learned through trial and lots of error. Although there's not much time for thinking up there, ponder these tips. Start the rotation as you climb the wave face. Sheet in as you take off and stay sheeted in all the way round. Look over your front shoulder to spot the landing and hope for the best. Perseverance and thick skin are often rewarded. Cheese rolls, forward rolls, killer loops are all variations of the forward somersault. It's spectacular, and having more control over the landing, your success rate can be very high. It's also a lot more dangerous. I mean, when you get up there, it just doesn't seem like a very good idea to throw yourself on top of all your kit. And there are times when you wish you could reverse the whole procedure, go home and try something else. Punish your body gently to start with by attempting it on flat water. Approach as if you were doing a chop hop. Then lift the heels, sheet in and cartwheel over the nose. You won't land cleanly, but you can water start quickly and claim a kill. In the waves, the stakes are higher, but the technique is much the same. Accidents will happen, but if you throw yourself into it and stay with the board and rig, you can enjoy many painless hours. When you're pulling them out to order, you know you're edging towards the limit. Take it away, chaps.
Well, Phil, that's it, I guess. Are you going to see that camel again?
Nah, these holiday romances, they never come to anything, do they?
No. Hey, this Jeep, we've given it a lot of stick, haven't we?
Have we? And has anyone actually owned up to parking it in the lagoon yet?
Oh, I don't think so, but I think it is trying to get his own back.
So, how do you think people are going to get the most out of this programme, then? I mean, there is an awful lot in it, you know?
Well, it's a case of homing in on a particular technique and watching our examples until all the elements have sunk in, and then practicing it in the right conditions.
Yeah. But of course, all your bad examples were deliberate, weren't they?
Of course they were. Analysing mistakes is very important.
Yeah. No point in perfecting mistakes. So So they need to think about it after each go, possibly with the help of an instructor.
Yes, and we all know our performance drops off when we're tired, and it's the same with windsurfing.
Well, are we there yet, Dad?
Oh, I hope so, son.
That was the most uncomfortable trip of my entire life.
Well, perhaps, Phil, if we stretch the budget just a little bit next time, the nice director man will let us sit in the front seat.
And talking of budgets, are you sure he said they've got to go back as cargo?
Yeah.
Where is he?
Well, David, it was a game of two arms, frankly. We came out early, gave it what I got. We set our stall out right at the start. Personally, I had a bad game, but then the lads pulled me through, and you can't afford that again, 110%. 110%. And out in the park, they're magnificent. Yeah, we lost 4-0, but we can't afford that, can we? And my liver's 4 times as big as it used to be. I've got holes in my legs the size of a pit. And I think I'll probably pass out. I've had 1 hour sleep in the last year, which is a personal best for me. Back in 44, I actually got 1.5 hours. And I was coming in now. No, that's untrue. I actually got 3 hours. But that's all I've got to do.
Wind and sea, a concoction of raw energy and surging power. For eons, humans have tried to tame the elements, to mix within its boundaries and tempt its awesome strength. Windsurfers know the sheer excitement of riding on Mother Nature's back, and they also know the fury that she can unleash.
The International Sailing Federation's World Windsurfing Championship. This beautiful port city, referred to by locals as Frio, was discovered by Sir Charles Howe Fremantle back in 1828. Full of heritage-style buildings, sidewalk cafes and places of interest, Fremantle today is a thriving tourist destination and an excellent choice of venue for all kinds of water-based sports. The multicultural mix that came from early European immigrants gives Fremantle a definite Mediterranean feel. Life in this city is laid back and cruisy.
Rio's a really nice place to kick back and relax on a hot summer's day like today.
Good place to go out and it's a good place to have fun. Beautiful weather and nice people, and I love to come back. I mean, it's really nice.
Love the atmosphere, the cafe strip and everything. It's really good.
It's friendly.
Yeah, it's great.
South Beach acted as a launching pad for the championships, which featured the Mistral Olympic class. International Funboard class, Formula 1 and Formula 42 classes, and the Longboard Windsurfer class. Almost 600 sailors from all corners of the globe came to town to try their luck.
Music Street and American Gramophone proudly present Fresh Air, the definitive collection, based on the popular Fresh Air contemporary.
For a top-of-the-range board, you're looking around about $2,500 just for your board, and then you need your sail, which is around $1,000, and a mast, that's $500, and extensions and boom, that'd be around $500. So you're looking at a lot of money. In the last 2 years, I've only been in the World Cup part-time, so I have not had the backing or financially to do the whole tour. And since I've been back here, you know, I won the national slalom titles, and so have, you know, approached me and sponsored me, and they're gonna support me in doing the world circuit next year, which is gonna enable me to do every event and get a full overall ranking in the world circuit. I'm actually working on a testing program with Gastra. They each year the sails are developed and updated each year, and while I'm in Australia, I work with Will and Blair on Gastra sails and develop and further and see for any improvements and things like that. You've basically got to be as fit as possible, because like you're out there racing for sometimes up to an hour at a time, and sometimes you do two or three races a day, possibly sometimes even 4. So you're racing up to 4 hours a day, and the fitter you are, the more competitive you are. Because as you get tired, you can't shoot the sail in as hard, and you can't pump the sail as hard, and you just don't get fatigued and make more mistakes as tired you get. So you really got to be as fit as you possibly can.
Production fun board time, and at last a chance for the shortboard specialists to show their wares. France's #1 Antoine Albert took to the water early to check out the conditions, as did the defending champion Jamie Hawkins from Britain. Hot Australian contender Steve Allen had moved to Perth months earlier for some extra training and looked fit and hungry for a title.
Here we are with the IFCA World Championships Fun Board Slalom Competition, and this is Christopher Rapp showing us how it's done as he flies across the bay. These slalom boards are the outright speed machines. There is no restrictions as to how much sail they put on them. They cram them full of sail. There is no centerboard under the board. It just simply has the fins, the same way you'd see on a surfboard. This is how they get the pace. Very small boards, very big sails. Look at the pace they've got as they come across. Antoine Albert there, having an absolute ball out here off the shores of Fremantle. Here he goes through a jibe. Kevin Pritchard having an absolute screamer. Look at the pace he's got. Board lifting up out of the air as he comes over some of the chop. Feet locked in the straps. Beautiful control as the Dane comes flying over the waterway. Peter Franzen having a ball, looking like he's got the pace today. Whoa, it's all happening at the jibe mark. Mucked it up completely, has fallen off the board to windward. There's the young Aussie. He's really been performing. Steve Allen, have a look at the sail shape.
Even after only 2 races, it was clear that the medals would be fought out between the top 5 contenders. Frenchman Antoine Albert, current champ Jamie Hawkins, Australian Steve Allen, American ace Kevin Pritchard, and Swede Christopher Rapp.
And look at the pace they've got today. Great, the Fremantle doctor arrived. She's really filling these sails full of pressure. And look at the boards. Haven't they changed over the years? These little slalom boards weigh in at just a few kilo. And look at the riders hanging on for grim death as they fly across on a knife's edge. Steve Allen, he'll take the gold. Fantastic performance, soaking up the cheers from the crowd as he goes through his final jibe, pumping the mainsail back up to full pressure. He's sailed like a champion today. He knows these waters, and strong they are. There's confirmation. Steve Allen, Australia, Kevin Pritchard with silver, and Christopher Rapp for bronze.
Yeah, I'm stoked out there, having a lot of fun. The conditions are really turning on for us this week. We've had wind and racing every day, so it's been really good, and I've just been getting more and more dialed in out here and winning by more and more, so it's a good feeling.
There was no competition when it came to finding the hard luck story of the World Windsurfing Championships. There was perhaps no happier young woman on this planet than Fremantle local Emily Lockwood when she won gold in the women's funboard class in her first international event.
The last race of the day was my best, so I'm just really, really happy to have finally pulled it off. So, but it's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. I've put a lot of work into it, and I just can't believe that it's happened. It's a dream.
Emily gathered family and friends together to celebrate at her home, but the party ended at midnight when the phone rang.
Last night I was basically having a barbecue celebrating, and we were sitting in front of TV watching a late night movie, and 12 o'clock I got a phone call saying that I may not have actually won. And they weren't sure at that stage, but naturally I was shocked, but just hoped it wasn't true. And then this morning Quentin Little rang me again and confirmed that it was true, and he'd spoken to the jury, and just because of this late protest and redress, that it could change the whole result.
In an international event of this standing, the jury has the right to accept protests and requests for redress and disqualifications right up until the day of the presentation. So in this case, a dispute from race 1 carried right all the way through until last night.
Emily was no longer world champion. She was relegated to second place behind Switzerland's Karen Jaggi. In fact, that was Emily's second blow. She'd had all her windsurfing gear stolen just prior to the event.
It was pre-season training, and I was down at the other end of South Beach, and I was out training for these kind of events, and all my equipment got stolen out of the car. And thanks to some media support, the Left Bank came to the party and helped me out, gave me some money to replace my equipment, got me straight back out on the water again on the same equipment that I was using before, and without them I wouldn't be where I am now.
As if that wasn't bad enough, Emily, world champ for just a few glorious hours, seriously injured her knee in a collision on the water later that week. The first Australian ever to win a funboard world title would, for all the wrong reasons, never forget the World Championships on her home beach. So it was that the title was delivered to Karen Jaggi of Switzerland. Emily had to be satisfied with the silver, and Alice Honori took the bronze. With the funboard world title under his belt, Steve Allen attacked the F42 class with almost arrogant panache, clocking up 7 wins from 9 starts. The final race was a mere formality, so Steve donned the head cam to show us how it's done.
5 seconds. 2, 1.
Fun for the race, fun for us. What an awesome display of windsurfing speed as Steve Allen goes across the fleet on port tack. He had no rights as he went through there. Here he is leading now. He's shot right out in front of everybody, and what a performer he is. Look at the pace again as we come flying across the waters off Fremantle. This guy, he's got it all together. He's strapped into the board right down the back, keeping the nose up out of the waves, and all, of course, keeping the pressure all in the rig. There he is with the head cam on. It's causing him no dramas whatsoever. It's like a walk in the park for him. Stamping his authority all over the F42 funboard class. These boards, they get to carry 2 in their selection and also 4 sails. There's the course for the funboards, the M shape. Up around the top, zigzag their way down, and then across through to the finish. Robbie Radis, the local, he's sailing in the F1s and winning that, a subdivision of this racing, but running second in the F42s overall. Jakob Appel having a mince-up of the waves as he cruises himself along toward the beach. Well, let's go back on board with Steve Allen. A jibe, another perfect jibe. He's got days behind him before the opposition. Jakob Appel, fully on fire today, flying across the waterway. The rig is bouncing around as he carves his way through the waves. Congestion at the jibe mark. Couple of competitors getting all tangled up. But what a recovery. These guys have been in a situation before. Oh, Robbie Radis absolutely turning the waves up. He's having to be very careful about his footwork, steering himself so beautifully. Well, here he is, Steve Allen, a picture of perfection. He's coming in toward the line now at a rate of knots, He looks so comfortable out there, swinging off the boom like he's at home.
Can't see him, so...
Here's the line, right in front of him. What a great performance by the young Australian. Steve Allen takes the gold. Robbie Raddis from Australia also picks up the silver. Bjorn Jensen from Denmark in with a bronze.
Totally stoked with that. Like, the whole 2 weeks of racing for me has just been unbelievable. Just been getting better and better toward the end, and I'm just totally stoked. It's my style, my board, everything together. Just been getting more and more dialed in out here. Just becoming really comfortable with my equipment, and there's a bit of weed in the water as well. I mean, a lot of us, we all have weed fins, to whether I'm getting more dialed into that than what the other guys are, and everything's just working really comfortable for me out there. Willem Blau's the designer of the sail, and I do a lot of testing with the sails with Robbie Raddis, who got second to me at this contest. Our last year's sail was a very fast sail, just a little more difficult to hold on to, and now we've come up with this one. It's still, like, there's not much in it speed-wise, but the ease of sailing over such a big course, that could be another thing, is I'm just not getting tired, and I can just keep pushing it the whole race, and I'm just trying to get further and further in front, which is it's a good feeling.
Wind and sea, a concoction of raw energy and surging power. For eons, humans have tried to tame the elements, to mix within its boundaries and tempt its awesome strength. Windsurfers know the sheer excitement of riding on Mother Nature's back, and they also know the fury that she can unleash. But for all that, there will always be those who can tame her.
Next Saturday at 10:15 p.m. we bring you $1 Million Golf. Meanwhile, Manchester United takes on Derby County in the English Premier League live on Premier 12.